Okay. History remembers the facts, but what about the phantoms that refuse to be forgotten? Welcome back to The Common Historian, where history meets the supernatural. I'm Jeremy, and each week we explore the haunting intersections between our past and the paranormal. Tonight, I'm crossing the border to British Columbia to speak with Gina Armstrong and Victoria Vancek, the award-winning sister duo behind Haunted History BC. These aren't your typical ghost hunters. They're historians, authors, and the creators of Canada's first paranormal magazine, Evenings and Avenues. From investigating BC's most active haunted locations like the Vancouver Police Museum to documenting the eerie legend of Mandy the Haunted Doll, they're preserving both the tangible and intangible history of Canada's most haunted province. So grab your favorite beverage, dim the lights, and prepare to journey north into a world where Canadian history refuses to stay buried. Welcome.
Hi
Hi.
there.
Hi.
It was a little wordy introduction, but you guys have done so much that I wanted to make sure I did a good start to the interview.
Oh, it's perfect. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks
we're
for having
excited.
us.
We're excited to be here as well.
How did the Spooky Sister Partnership form? What kind of reignited your childhood fascination with the paranormal in 2017?
Oh,
Oh,
wow. Okay, so this is Victoria from Haunted History BC. I think it just all started with our love for the paranormal and just in general, like as we were kids. Gina, I'm sure you can attest to that. I think
yes.
too that one thing what we really enjoyed is I think that never died in us, like being just interested in mysteries and supernatural and all that kind of stuff. I think we always enjoyed reading books, but I think it was more during, I guess, the pandemic was when it really kicked it off. But I think in 2017 was when we started visiting locations in British Columbia just for fun. And we were visiting
Yeah.
places like bed and breakfasts and all these historic locations. And we, in fact, were seeking those kind of locations out to stay. And then basically, I think from there, I think our love for I think the history and paranormal just kind of intertwined. And we were thinking about maybe doing some like photography. We're taking pictures of locations. And people started saying that they loved the photography that we were presenting. And they started asking us too, like if we're going to do anything like a book and whatnot. But at the time, we weren't thinking of books. And then by 2018, 2019, that's when we started taking more pictures of locations. And from there, we designed our wall calendar, our haunted wall calendar. And from there, Gina, I think you introduced me to the walking tour on the island
Yes.
in Victoria.
Yes. We ended up going on a couple of spooky walking tours. We went in Victoria, BC. So that's on Vancouver Island. And we venture there probably 2 or 3 times a year. And it has a lot of history, a lot of historic sites that we like to visit, a lot of stories of ghosts. They are not shy about their ghostly activity over there. So we do go over there quite often. And they do have a very comprehensive historic ghostly walk. So we started with that one. And we just got kind of a feel for back to really liking history, liking the ghost stories, and it just kind of intrigued us all over again. So we started not in addition with our photography that we started writing about the locations that we've been to. Some of them have been visited before or written about before, but I would say that it was more just of our personal take on what our experiences were. And we wanted to share the historic side, but also preserve the ghost stories. And some spots that we visited weren't highly documented yet. So we really wanted to not only showcase like the places that were commonly known to be haunted, but we wanted to venture into locations that maybe never had somebody delve deep into the history or the paranormal side. So then when we did both, then we kind of blended those two things together. And then that's how our books kind of came about. And we really wanted to do a book about ghost stories, but then there were so many locations and the way we wanted to present it, we wanted to have room for not only our writing, but also our photos and everything else that goes along with it to kind of give people the feel that they're there. And then from there, we started doing some ghostly tours ourselves.
That's great. So, you guys have described yourselves as kind of open-minded skeptics. How does the approach shape your investigations differently from traditional ghost hunters?
Ooh, that's
I
a personal question, kind of. So I think everybody has their own approach when they are looking for whatever it is they're looking for, I think they have their own goals as to what they're trying to research. For us, it's sort of a blend of like being curious about if it's true. Like if we hear about a haunted location and that has, has had some sort of activity, we want to see for ourselves before we write about it. And we want to add to that story. And also, we use it to kind of fill in the blanks of on the history side. So that's one of the things that we like to do. So I'm going to give it over to my sister too, so she can kind of give her personal take on it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So for me, even as a skeptic, I like the fact that although there's sometimes a lot of history out there, I don't necessarily like to always read up on the location. Sometimes I think we want to surprise ourselves. We want to get the first feel, I guess, sort of thing. When we visit a location, we like to also walk around it, walk outside, check out the exterior, just get a feel for it. And we're not necessarily, I would say, we're not sensitives, we're not mediums, we're not psychics or anything. But I have to say, sometimes the first impressions, gut intuition, I think that kind of drives us to also investigate and keep an open mind before we read anything or, anything even online or even in books. And yeah, then sometimes we like to actually go head first knowing about the history. So I probably would say that I think it depends. Like when we go to a location, sometimes we want to surprise ourselves and find out because I think it's the intrigue, the mystery, right? Like sometimes you want to just go in and say, oh, so is something going to happen? So you don't know, right? And so you just sort of anticipate. And sometimes you want to learn a little bit more about the history about a location before you enter.
And we
Yeah,
started
totally.
without equipment in the beginning. We
Yeah.
started initially just staying in places that supposedly had a haunted story just to see what happened. And of course, historic buildings are always beautiful to stay in, but we
Mhm.
just started with, just listening, seeing, hearing. We always have your phones with you so you can, you know, go, I guess, have that as some sort of paranormal equipment. But yeah, we never had a full array of it till more recently when we started doing the public events because people sort of like to grab something and, just to go
Mhm.
look around to see what's out there. And they like to have like some sort of visual or audible confirmation. But we started with nothing except just going in and listening, hearing, talking to people. And that was kind of our approach early on.
Right. And for sure. And that's the thing. Our plan was never to do paranormal investigations. We were always wanted to we were always curious about more like the history of a location. And like Gina said, then when we started talking to some of the caretakers, maybe the curators of the locations, they would just sort of open up and tell us, hey, but do you guys know that there's also a legend behind this or folklore? And we're like, really? And that's how it just happens. Sometimes we talk to locals and they open up and they tell us stories. So I think that's the brilliant part of it. Like that's so exciting. You've got people with firsthand accounts telling you stories. And even if it's a legend, hey, let's record it. Because after all, it is history and it's intangible history. You want to talk about it, you want to write about it. It's basically storytelling. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, why is preserving intangible history through ghost stories so important to Canadian heritage? You feel?
Oh,
I think it's just,
yeah.
yeah,
Gina,
I
go ahead.
think it's just kind of part of our culture too. So, each location we find that when we travel all throughout BC, pretty much every place has its own unique story. It kind of reflects the community history, the community attitudes, and it just even on a broader level, just the attitudes of like human beings and the paranormal, because it's something that people have been fascinated with just going back in time. Like people have been really fascinated with what happens after we pass and is there anything afterwards? And people have all these questions. And I think it's something that we're kind of intrigued by, scared of, curious about. So I think it's kind of nice to preserve those types of stories just because also when you hear them verbally, those are the ones that have a tendency to get lost. Nobody would know unless we write it down and unless there's a way to preserve it or present it. So that's why we have our website, we have social media, we have our books. So hopefully we preserve those for future generations too.
For sure. And storytelling is an art as well. And you have to be careful because when you share a story, sometimes the stories change over time. And that's a common thing. So it's best to record, basically get all the information from the horse's mouth, basically get all the stuff and record it and then keep it documented.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what makes BC's paranormal landscape unique?
Oh, wow. Well, I definitely will say we've definitely got the environment here. We've got the largest coastline, just so you know, not bragging, but I will say that it's the water. Many of the locations that we visit, like Gina said, our capital is Victoria on the island. They often claim, oh, it's the most haunted location. I think it's also dates back to our foundations, the pioneers, people from all around the world who immigrated here, who tried to make British Columbia and Canada their home. The gold rush in 1858, that was the largest one that was in British Columbia that kind of hit the scene. And people came from all around the world searching for the mother lode. And I think it's everything. It's a tragedy, everything that came along with it, the people who had persevered. I think it's also, like I said, the environment, the landscape, the water, and the conductors, right, Gina?
Yeah, I think the geography has a lot to do with it too, because even when you look at things like, just basic things like stone tape theory and talking about ley lines and things like that, we have kind of all the elements. We have the water, we have the mountains, we have, just a lot of different terrain that might be really conducive to holding on to things. And yeah, we're not maybe as old on this side of the country as some, but we do have buildings and places where people were a couple hundred years ago and the settlements started. And, there's just traces of those settlements still left over when you go and look and see those places. There's some that are abandoned, there's some better preserved, but there's still a lot that still lingers from that time. So if you're talking about those types of things in the paranormal world, yes, there might be still attachments to that, to the land, to the buildings, to anything around. So who knows? It's a very mysterious place.
Yeah, indeed. Is there some unique characteristics that's different than what we see in the States when it comes to the haunted places in BC?
No, that's a good question.
I think too, for British Columbia, we don't have, I don't think, as many buildings as across the states. A lot of them, as Gina pointed out, I think you guys have, I would say, a lot of older buildings, and the Civil War adds to it as well. There are a lot of
Mhm.
atrocities as well. But I probably, like, we had our tragedies here as well too. But I think probably, I would say, I think the number of buildings probably in the US, we don't have as many. I mean,
Buildings, even accessibility sometimes, because
right.
it seems like, there's hospitals that are dilapidated and different things. And, you see people just in the States going into those places. They're not as accessible here. So I would say that, you can get into some of them, but you might have to chat with somebody. They're not so open, like, oh, all the paranormal investigators are going to be let in and, there's going to be like hordes of people coming through, where we see like, certain spots in the States are pretty open to anybody coming through. There's, caretakers and owners who just
Yeah.
allow you to come in. I think a lot of ours is, not only people are a little shy about the ghostly activity on certain historic locations and sites and don't want to attract that, but also from like a safety standpoint, we see people going into locations in the States that look like they're about to fall over. And there's like groups of people walking through the halls and going in and the paint's peeling and it might not be all that safe to go in. So I think we're a little bit, maybe a little bit more cautious here with some of our locations.
Yeah. And I think too, here we probably are still quite unknown. There's a lot of buildings, a lot of locations and sites that are not well known. I think in the US, there's a lot more many locations that have been talked about, investigated, as Gina pointed out. And I think that's probably the key. I think there's a lot, like, I think here we focus a lot on the more common things, like the more
Mhm.
like, the Vancouver hotel being haunted or the Empress on the island. We hear that over and over regurgitated, but and I
Mhm.
think that's kind of what we want to do. Gina and I, we want to actually go beyond that. So that's why our book is actually, that was our inspiration, Evenings and Avenues, Hauntings in the
In
Outskirts.
the outskirts. We want to go to the less commonly known places. So we've had great success going to new locations that have maybe not ever had paranormal investigations. And the one huge thing that I would say that we do differently is that we actually likes to take groups with us. So like last night, for example, we went to a brand new location. We've never been there before. We knew of it and we've admired it from afar. But we did two separate groups. So we went in with one group for a couple hours. And then after that, a second group came in. And we like to kind of have people witness the same things that we witness, or to even maybe have their own interactions so we can observe and just see what happens. I think you just get a more rounded, I guess, haunting experience from all that, just seeing other people interact with the location too, that might not be a paranormal investigator, might be an enthusiast, might be somebody who's curious about location, might be a history buff. There's people from all walks of life who come to our events. And that's one of the things that we like to do, that we just sort of started doing. And now we've actually really enjoyed it because it gives us a whole different perspective on, what paranormal activity is and who can experience it. It's not just the select few, it's anyone who comes in. You don't have to be a medium. You don't have to have equipment. Things can, if the place is active, it will be active.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
people from all ages, I would say, right? Like we have
Yes.
people from like, I think the youngest was 9 years old. Yeah, she
Oh,
was
yeah.
on this relic train. We were out there as well just about 4 weeks ago. And people of all ages, like even 70s and 80s. And I think they are just curious, as Gina said. And I think that's the best part. And I think different individuals bring different energies.
They do.
Yeah, I think they really do. You talked about the lesser known places that you guys kind of explore. How do you guys seek those out or find them?
Uh-huh. Well, definitely we don't trespass. We definitely are very respectful. Most of the time we like to just reach out to people, those who maybe are managing or owning the property. It's just a matter of trying to figure out if they will allow us to come in, do it respectfully. And many times if people say that, yes, you can come in. We had one situation where we went to a location. They allowed us to investigate. It took us about a couple of years to get in. But the individual said, please do not post anything or anything. But for your own personal interest, you can definitely chat with me. You can roam through the building. It was a hotel, an inn from the
Yeah.
Gold Rush days. Yeah. So it was really cool. Some people are like that, but they still allow us. That does not deter us because we're not out to chase headlines or to post things like on TV or to put it somewhere else. We're here to document information, and we respect, and also we actually enjoy the fact that people open up to us.
That's the other way we find out.
Yeah.
So when we're at events or when we post something, people do reach out to us or they come up to us and say, oh, have you been to this location? Because I heard so and so had an experience there, or I had an experience there. And they tell us about something unknown that's happened. And maybe it's not a location that's widely known, or, and it's not always a building either. So we hear great stories about like sections in the woods or like different areas where we actually go just looking for things in the landscape. So
Yeah.
it's, there's creature sightings, there's
Yeah.
UFO sightings. So we go to a lot of places that people sort of tip us off. And that's one thing that we really love is when people give us a hint of like, oh, have you, and especially if you hear something 3, 4, 5 times where somebody out, says, different people say, oh, have you gone to this place? Then we're really curious. So then we do have to check it out for ourselves. We have a few on the list right now. So
We do.
That's great. So, kind of moving on to several locations you guys have researched had First Nation history. I think Beacon Hill Park as a burial site, Fort Langley. How do you approach investigating locations with the First Nation sacred history and being respectful of that?
we really don't. So we don't particularly go like a lot of people have said, oh, will you go to the residential schools or will you go to locations where things like that happened? Those things are so in the forefront right now and they're just so raw for a lot of people that we won't broach that because it's not really our story to tell. There are places that, of course, Fort Langley, that are open to the public, that we go, but we always include the history of the indigenous peoples, workers who came here, Chinese railway workers, the Japanese who were interned in camps and things like that. We do actually talk about those things in our stories. So I think a lot of times telling the paranormal side is very entertaining and exciting and intriguing, but we also are fair to the history side, and we're actually heavier on the history side, and we include those stories because they're a real part of history. So it's not always just the sugar-coated fun part that we include in our books. We want people to know like the actual histories. And so we do reach out to people and talk to them and make sure that if we're on a touchy subject, we do send them whatever we're going to write about and say, are you okay with this? Are we able to? And like Victoria said earlier, we went to a place where the owner said, well, please don't post anything. And we just absolutely won't. So yeah, I think it's just having that respect and knowing what the boundaries are, because there are boundaries.
Yeah, there is always that boundary. You want to make sure that you respect that and keep your credibility as well.
Mhm.
Oh, and Jeremy, too, another thing just added to that is, even when we go to a location that requires us to even rent out a location, we actually rent locations too, just so if we can do an event or do any type of investigation, it's not just like a free for all. It's not like someplace we just go, but we actually, when we are serious about researching and documenting something, we do to go through the hoops and the loops and everything, like to just get in and also to pay the rent and all that stuff. And if we want to take people along as well. So it's a lot of like a go between. You have to always like email people, find out what they want, what they allow us to do, what we can do. And yeah, so it's a whole combination of things. So yeah, for
I
sure.
think you have to
Yeah.
also earn people's trust a lot of times, because like we said, some places we wait 2-3 years to get into a place. And it's not that people are necessarily of us, but maybe they've had another not so great experience with investigators coming in or something that's happened in the past. And we sort of have to kind of build that rapport a little bit. And we certainly do appreciate when we get the rare occasions to go to places that don't often welcome paranormal investigators. So we feel very grateful that they allow us to come in. They trust us with the location, and they not only trust us, but they tell us a little bit more about the story and the history too. They sort of open up after a while, and seeing us conduct ourselves, that we are serious about not only like the paranormal side, but the historical side. And we make sure to highlight locations. Like, it's not just about the ghosts. So if you have a local museum, you have a local heritage site, go there and visit. There's a lot of fascinating stories without the ghost stories. So just go there and take a look. And we did a lot of that during the pandemic, just, visited places in our backyard. So we learned a lot just that way. And there's a lot of mystery, a lot of fascinating stories, a lot of interesting artifacts.
The archivists and the people and the curators there, they're amazing. They can provide you and give you a little bit more guidance and information.
Yeah. And I can relate. There was actually one location that I was trying to get the owner to interview. He wanted to just make sure that I was not going to sensationalize what's actually happening there, because he's had a few bad experiences in the past. I won't name any names, but I can really relate with that, even in the interviewing part of things.
For sure, for sure. We've run into similar situations like that too. We've heard groups or individuals coming into a location and sensationalizing it or making it out to be more about ghosts, more about, that there's a lot like dark entities in a location. And, they're open to tourists. So you don't really want to do that as well. But obviously, you want to be unbiased. You want to express the experiences that you have encountered, but at the same time, you have to be respectful.
I think it's too about a little bit about giving back. We give back to a lot of the locations that we visit, whether we bring people in, we donate, we do fundraisers. So we do try to do things, or even like when we visit cemeteries, we love to visit cemeteries, but we've also partaken in things like their headstone preservation projects and clean gravestones. And so it's about kind of building the community outside of just the stories or what you're looking for yourself. Like, you want to actually contribute to other things out there. And we also offer a wide range of free events so that people can come for free as well. So you attract people to the location, and it's a free event, and then anybody can, they can attend. So that's
Right.
something we tried to balance out a little bit too.
Accessibility is really the key, and to also like community engagement. So for us, it's about essentially communication, education, and awareness.
Kind of transitioning into some of the locations that you have visited and investigated. The Vancouver Police Museum, often cited as one of BC's most active locations. What happened when you guys went there? Did you guys catch anything?
Oh, wow. That place is like our investigations were epic every single time we went there. And we weren't there just with the one time, right, Gina? We've been
No, because we
several
went ourselves, but then we also like did the whole group, like we were allowed to bring in a few people too. So we had some very interesting experiences, like ourselves and with groups. We caught everything from like EVPs to had like intelligent responses to our equipment, because we actually show some of this in one of our events that we do. We actually show some of the evidence that we've collected, either audio, video, photographic, or anything that we've collected. And so we actually have people look at that. But yeah, there's a section where we actually are asking for intelligent responses to triggering certain equipment. And that was sort of mind blowing. And over the years, people have heard things too, shared different things that they've encountered over there. So yeah, we've had a wide range.
Yeah, we had like motion detecting devices as well go off and right on cue. And it wasn't just one device, but we sometimes like to set up several different types. And, we tell, well, if we're communicating and we think we're communicating with an entity, then we just sort of direct them and tell them, okay, can you touch this device first or touch the one with the little red light? And I tell you, when you see that and you capture it on video, oh my God, it's exciting.
Yeah, that place is very active. I mean, the history on that place is it used to be a courthouse, a morgue, and it housed the forensic units early on. And so there was a lot of activity that took place just historically in that place. So yeah, I would say that it has a reason to have that energy sort of still be lingering. So when you look at all the historical things and all the artifacts that are in there, yeah, we're very intrigued. We've been there more than once.
Yeah, and people have also detected voices, a little girl's voice. And then in the morgue area, there's a group also investigating there. We were there too, and they recorded something like a pitter patter of feet, like up against the tile. So that was a little creepy. And then my EVP, I remember when I was roaming around in there the first time when we went there, we were reviewing that, and there was like a man's voice. It was moaning.
That's crazy. So another place that Mandy the Haunted Doll at the Quesnel Museum.
Mandy.
And well, one of the fun fact is I reached out to them about doing an interview, and they've invited me to actually go to the location at some point.
Really?
See,
They're not shy about this haunted doll. They've got video. They've got like a pamphlet on her. They've
that's
got,
Gina's favorite place.
yeah.
At some point, hopefully, I will be able to get there. But I was kind of surprised. They were like, "Oh yeah, come down, visit, see Mandy." And what was your most unsettling experience with Mandy?
Okay, so just so everybody knows, Mandy is housed in Quesnel Museum. So that's all the way pretty well up north. So you're over there. So we went there and it was amazing. But
Kind of a funny Mandy story, sort of. So the whole idea is this doll has had this history. It's been, it was donated by a woman who got it from her grandmother. She had it in her basement, started hearing a baby crying. So she was very unsettled, donated it to the museum because it was an old doll. She didn't want to just get rid of it. And then Mandy did kind of the media circuit back in the 90s. She was on Montel Williams, like Sylvia Brown, the psychic sort of assessed Mandy and all this. Eventually, Mandy ended up in this glass case in Quesnel Museum. And there's kind of some rules around visiting her, kind of like other haunted dolls or objects. We did well with her. We had a great time. We took some pictures. We looked at the video and all the different information they have about her. And then my husband, who's comes with us. He's not like really into the ghost hunting, but he'll come along and he'll come partake and everything. So we ended up leaving, and like literally like 30 seconds of pulling outside from the museum, and we're just down the street a little ways. Here come the police headlights. The police lights are going off, and there's a car behind us. Well, speeding ticket. So we ended up with like a $250 ticket, and we were just a little confused too. So we pulled out of this one area. We're not familiar with that part of Quesnel, so we just kind of, there was a speeding area where you sort of like right away there was a sign that you're supposed to reduce your speed, and we didn't. And so I just said, it's Mandy, because you weren't nice to her. So next time we all have to say and acknowledge her. But I don't know if that was just a coincidence, but people have left the doll saying they felt sick, they had some bad luck, or, but ours was pretty nominal.
Yeah, and there's a story about Mandy too, that when she was introduced to the museum, that even the staff had noticed sometimes things were in a disarray, like when they left the building and came back next morning and they're like looking at, there's like mess everywhere. And then to appease her, they gave her like a little lamb, like a little toy lamb. And now when she's in her cabinet, she's sitting there with a little toy just dedicated to her. But there were stories about the cabinet then opening, and then the little lamb was on the floor. And the coolest thing is, Jeremy, if you ever go there, the staff will give you even a handout. There's like a little handout about Mandy, the whole story about her. And they actually say, haunted doll.
They're not shy about Mandy.
No, it
But
didn't
we would
seem
go
like
see
it.
her again. We were
Is
happy
she,
to see her firsthand.
is she Canada's version of Annabelle?
Pretty much. Maybe a little scary. Kind of like Annabelle or Robert. So
She sounds more like a Robert than an
a
Annabelle,
little
I
bit.
think.
Yeah.
You have to ask permission to take a picture of
Yes.
him.
And we did the
Um,
same. We asked permission. We said goodbye, hello, goodbye. So yeah, no, you don't want to mess with a haunted object. So
but yes, Mandy sounds fun.
She's waiting for you, Jeremy.
Yeah, maybe someday.
yeah.
So kind of, the Beacon Hill, now, I think is a story about a doppelganger leading to a discovery of a body in the 1980s. Do you think that some apparitions are trying to communicate specific information rather than just lingering?
We've been to locations as well too, where I think we have intelligent conversations with entities of some sort, and it just is mind blowing. So I think there are sometimes messages, just like last night when we went to that one location as well. I think we did tap into something, but I'm not sure if the message was that the spirit that was talking with us, if it possibly was trapped, because that's the feeling that we got a little bit. So I think there are sometimes true intelligent messages that are coming through for sure.
If there's something that recurs over and over again, especially that Beacon Hill one was interesting because in the 1970s, people saw the apparition originally. Then in like 83, that appeared again, like a decade later, and in the same location, sort of, where this then, a few meters away, this body was found. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I think when you're looking at something like that, I would say if there's a pattern, especially that happens over and over again, I would say that I would believe that they are trying to communicate something.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the Old Courthouse Inn in Powell River. I
Ooh,
think that if I remember correctly, you guys have documented some playful child spirit.
yes.
And it looks like I think in room one. And did you experience anything additionally like firsthand there while you were there?
Oh,
Holy, yes.
absolutely.
So the child spirit is just kind of aside, like one of many that the courthouse, I would say, is jam packed full of spirits. One of the oldest theaters is right across the street, the Patricia Theater, the oldest running theater in BC. So there's just a lot of history there. And that building, and again, the owner, not shy about the haunted activity. So they do paranormal weekends where we show up and people rent the place for Saturday, Sunday, and we basically Friday night we'll do an investigation, Saturday night, and we all debrief like afterwards.
Yeah.
So yes, the courthouse is very, very active. So we had things like set out like even flashlights where we've posted like where we say, okay, can you turn on the flashlight? It turns on in one video. And then I say, can you turn it on a little bit brighter? And it gets brighter like instantly. So we had a
Mhm.
lot of interesting activity there.
And when I was in my room, I remember hearing a tapping noise right by my head, like on the nightstand. I thought to myself, well, this is weird because it sounds so close to me. So I looked at my table, thought nothing of it. So I tried going back to bed again and I heard the tapping noise. And then I thought that was really odd too. But then in the morning, I also had like a little device. Remember, all of us, like we had these things called harmony bells.
Oh, the bell that we put out.
So in the morning, someone next door to me is actually ringing the bell. And it was you, Gina. You had your bell ringing, and then I had mine as well. So we had a couple harmony bells that were just ringing off the hook, basically. And I don't know
And that
what
was the
that was.
same day that we had the
Yeah,
knocking on the door, right? And there's nobody
exactly.
there. Yeah, so
Exactly.
that place is very, very, very interesting. We have gone back a couple times. We will go back again one day.
Oh, for sure. And it's kind of fun because you get to interact with the guests that are there. So the guests are there
Mhm.
specifically for this paranormal investigation. But honestly, like there's so much activity. We sent one guy to do the Estes method. So he's blindfolded, puts on noise canceling headphones, and we sent him into the basement. It kind of looked like a crawl space.
And
So
it
he's
was,
there
yeah,
with a bunch of dolls as well that Gina, you brought along as
yeah.
well. So that was kind of fun. But we sent him down there and it was like around 10 o'clock at night. So all the guests come out and we're actually watching and communicating with this guy upstairs. And we ask questions. He doesn't hear us, But he's got the spirit box. So the spirit box is basically like the radio that just goes back and forth, sweeping between stations. And
Mhm.
sometimes when you're in communication with something, you hear blurts of words, something comes out. So this guy's like feeling like his leg is being touched. Then he's got like a lot of assertive responses, almost like
Yes.
a child says something, no
Mhm.
more, don't want to be here, or something like that. And
Yes.
he honestly believed that it was the communication that he was having with the dolls, because the
Yeah.
dolls had a history as well. And Gina actually had an opportunity to research them. So she had
Yeah,
them
they
with
lived with
her
me for a
for
while.
about
They
two
were not
years.
mine, but they did live with me for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was very interesting. And I think too that we had that candle session that we did, and we
Oh,
did it remotely with a medium that was not on site, but
amazing.
he was familiar with the courthouse. And he just said, well, can we kind of do a session? Because I have a feeling like this gentleman energy is coming through. So we did indeed have a session with this spirit, kind of with the remote medium session going on. But that was very fascinating as well. But yeah, that place has a lot of interesting history and has cemetery close by. And yeah, Powell River, Old Courthouse Inn. If you're, local or even not, then go visit.
For sure.
It sounds exciting. So, kind of next, the Valley Lake Chateau near Revelstoke. What evidence did you collect there?
Oh, wow. Okay, so the Three Valley Gap, that's in Revelstoke, and it's amazing. It's a beautiful chateau, no joke of a lie. It looks literally like a fairy tale castle. So, if for anybody who wants to go out there, great skiing as well. You can ski there, you can go fishing, a lot of back roads as well too, but make sure you have a good all-terrain vehicle. So, we were actually over there because first of all, just the beauty and the mystery. We also know that there is a ghost town. I'll let Gina tell you a little bit more about that. But the coolest thing was that we heard very little about this place. We did hear some things about maybe that there might be like an old man roaming around in the inn, and maybe
Yes.
like a little girl as well, or some sort of little child. But the coolest thing was that we, for fun, decided to do an investigation in Gina's hotel room. Not mine. I did not want to do it. So we had all these devices set out, and we literally had intelligent conversation going on. And we had EMF, an electromagnetic field meter, as well with us. Gina was holding it in her hand. We had a REM pod, which also is triggered by just a touch, basically, and it flickers and makes all these noises. And then we had something called a pet ball or cat ball. Basically, you bat the ball around and it flashes. It does all this red and blue lights. So we had all three items out and we caught it on video, thankfully. But Gina was conversing with something in her room, I guess. And the coolest thing was her EMF kicked off first. It started triggering and it was like flashing like crazy. And then it was the motion ball that started next. It was like a domino effect. And Gina says, I know this is really hard, but maybe if you could generate more energy and just touch that REM pod, the little device with the red light and the antenna. And instantly it got triggered, noises started coming, lights were flashing,
Yes.
and we all freaked and screamed and we were all excited, maybe a little scared too.
Yeah, that was an interesting location for sure. And then yeah, one of the like when you would look for things, when you hear about paranormal activity or lack of or whatever, you sort of look to see what's around. But that Three Lakes Valley Chateau is right behind it. There are several buildings that were brought over the years by the owners, historic buildings that were moved right beside the hotel. And then you can visit all of them. It's now like a small, like makeshift ghost town. So you can visit all these historic buildings that were brought over. They were preserved and refinished. And so you can kind of go around and visit all of them. It's a very, very fun place to visit, but we can definitely see how maybe even energy was brought over from some of these other buildings. So if there is anything there, it would kind of make sense because these buildings are there and that a lot of them were early 1900s, late 1800s, and they're just now all perched together. So it must be generating something, I would think.
Yeah, some sort of haunted history for sure, correct?
Oh, for
Because,
sure.
with all the energies, there might have been something attached. They've seen a lot of history, that's for
Well,
sure.
like the Hotel Bellevue, like they do allow people every so often, like that one sits kind of behind it and it's not anything that's open anymore. None of these buildings are in full service, but the little market is, because they have like a little couple of the little corner stores are there still, historic ones. But yeah, this Bellevue Hotel you can go into, and that has had some known haunted activity. People said over the years that that has some interesting sort of darker energy.
Yeah, it was a bit notorious because there used to be a brothel as well.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. You never know what you're gonna, especially some of the older stuff. You really just don't know what you're gonna get when you go in there. A lot of the things have been repurposed, etc.
Mhm.
Um, so um kind of the last kind of location specific. Um, so the BC Penitentiary is now a neighborhood with the Notorious Grey Fox pub. How does modern development affect paranormal activity at historically dark locations, in your opinion?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
well, I definitely would say, and I've actually mentioned this before, we had a discussion over this with somebody else. I probably will say that buildings of all ages, new and old, I'm sure may have some activity. It's not just because it has to be historical and old. I think it's sometimes what was there before. So the BC Penitentiary is a really good example. It's also known as BC Penn. It was one of our maximum prisons, the biggest one, I would say the first one in Western Canada. And it sadly housed people of all sorts of people were caught, stealing something to mass murderers. So it's unfortunate in a way that it was all combined, all put together like that. And as it started to grow, there were a lot more disruptions. A lot of the prisoners were unhappy over there. They were rioting a lot. So it's a big, massive, I would say it was horrendous, like at that time. Like there was a lot of deaths involved in there. I think also with all that energy, I think even like the stone tape theory that suggests that something always gets recreated or just, it's sort of recorded and it just goes on and on. So I think probably with new buildings, you got to be careful because we've heard
And
stories too as well. Pavers from certain prisons were used and repurposed and put
yes.
along around a carousel as well.
So interestingly, you ask about developments. Sometimes, oddly, only a portion is developed. Like for the BC Penitentiary, the top floor has been redone completely. Somebody used to live up there, and it is done up with chandeliers and just really nice architecture. It's, like it looks like an upscale house of some sort. Then the rest of it on the main floor was businesses. There was a daycare, oddly, and there was a restaurant. But then you go down below where there's storage, quote. But the storage is the actual solitary cells, and they're still there. Sometimes
Oh,
I think when you leave sort of something unfinished, that part might linger because though we've been down there and it looks exactly like they would, minus the bars. There's now normal doors on there. People use it for storage. Most of them were just empty when we looked at it. We've been there a couple of times, but you're kind of layering like the new and the old. And I don't think sometimes that gels too well. Like you sort of are leaving your own unfinished business because you haven't remodeled the whole thing. So there's still traces of what used to be. And that could, if there was anything paranormal, which that site is known for paranormal activity, I think it could sort of be confusing. If there are spirits around, it can confuse you because you see it as like, if they're able to see like the regular development, but then you've got also solitary cells which look and feel like they used to look and feel, 80, 100 years ago, then that can be kind of confusing. Or if you
Mhm.
put something on top of, we had one location where there was a high school that was built in New Westminster, BC, and it's now since been demolished because they built a new one and everything, but it was built on top of a burial site where, the first pioneers, indigenous people, Japanese, Sikhs, everybody was buried there. And they supposedly moved the majority of the people, but not very well and not thoroughly. And then they built a school over it. Well, that school had been known for all kinds of haunted activity, some urban legends that weren't true, but I think a lot of times you have to be careful because, people joke about like the Foldergeist movie and seeing like this house that was built on top of a burial site. But I think you do have to be careful in some realms, not to just to know where you're building and what was there
Mhm.
before.
Yeah.
how did that all come about? Uh,
Oh, for sure, for sure. So actually, the funny thing is, Gina mentioned earlier that our whole goal was to document historical locations in British Columbia. And our goal was, hey, let's write a book. So, and then we started visiting many other locations, and we just realized we've acquired so much information, so much photography. We figured there's no way we can do this into one book. So
No.
we wanted to do something a little bit different, not just so it's like novel looking, not like a novel, but we wanted maybe to make it look a little bit like a coffee table book, but at the
Yeah, a
same
little
time
bit.
incorporate everything. So as we started getting ideas, there is a bit of themes that are running through each volume. We created a series, basically Evenings and Avenues, Hauntings and the Outskirts. They are basically, it's a series. And we've got so far volume 1, 2, and 3. As we continue to plan where we want to visit, we've discovered we probably can do about 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 volumes still.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Wow.
And then I think we keep adding to it because now we're also visiting newer locations. We haven't even written about some of the locations we've visited in the past. So there is quite a bit. And I think just the way we want to present it a little bit differently, like with the photos and different things. So it does take a little while to document everything. But yeah, it started from, like we mentioned, we did a wall calendar. So we did a wall calendar with like little haunted blurbs and some really great photography. And people said, "Oh, you need to do a book." And so we started kind of toying with, and I love to write. So that's one of the things that was always a dream to kind of write a book. So we just started going at it and we're continuing. Like
Yeah,
with
for
most of
sure.
our ventures, we start off with something and then it just keeps sort of mushrooming. And then, yeah, and we'll keep going until we feel like we're done
We
It
with.
have
sounds
people ask us the same thing about if we would ever go to another province or somewhere else. But I think there's still a lot of locations out there that need to be focused on
Oh,
and
lots
write
here we haven't
about.
explored.
And you know what? You don't have to chase ghosts. You can also find like just the history to be very interesting. That's kind of the goal too, that we do put a paranormal spin on some of our stories if there are any legends to share. And that's also to show people too, it's not like history doesn't have to be dull and drab. You can just as well have some really engaging stories about locations, even within your own communities. But the cool thing is just try to reach out to the people that are there, the locals. They can share all this information and they have fun with it too. You learn, it's all
Oh,
educational.
we found some very interesting things. Like we found like the first female gravedigger was in BC. So when we did a lot of research, then we were researching cemeteries and different local legends and everything. And there's no haunted activity associated with her, but we did find that Maggie Bond was like the first female gravedigger in Canada, and she happened to be in British Columbia. So that's kind of a cool thing too, just to have that sort of knowledge out there. And so we do record all of those different things that we come across and that might not be widely known, and people do find it fascinating. So when we do our cemetery walks, not only do we share sometimes, some of the folklore and legends, like about the local cemetery or in general about cemetery superstitions, but we can throw in those tidbits, and usually people find it quite fascinating.
And the other thing too is that we do our own stuff. We do our own writing, our photography, we do all the design like in the book. So
Yes.
it's a two-woman company basically,
Yes.
it's, or I should say adventure. So yeah, that's one thing. So it keeps us really busy. We both work full time, but we love it. We love delving into all this historical aspects and stuff, and just a lot of fun. And like I said, we learn a lot this way too.
British Columbia is quite a big province too, so
It is. Yeah, and we haven't even touched on like all the UFO sightings, the Sasquatches, because we do travel to learn about those as well. There's a lot of interesting stories about, areas that have creature sightings, just all kinds of mysterious entities and shadows and hat men. And
And
so
people
so
disappearing too,
people
right? People
disappearing. We have our very own Canadian Triangle here in BC. So that's something we've delved into as well. And that started when we traveled through the Gold Rush trails. Specifically, we started then delving into things, and we found that people were disappearing, like in some interesting wooded areas, and not only disappearing, but they would be sometimes transported to locations and they couldn't remember how they got there, what happened. They had no recollection. And that kind of came from our Sasquatch research, because a lot of times Sasquatch is, kind of connected to things like time slips. And then it just, then you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and then we sort of got into the whole concept about David Paulides, his 411 Missing series. And he was the one who brought up the whole concept about British Columbia having a triangle, BC triangle.
Yes.
And he's a former San Jose police officer. So he was looking into national parks and people disappearing mysteriously. So he had different sorts of profile points that matched, that were very unusual circumstances. So it was pretty fascinating reading up on that. So we discovered through David Paulides and also like our Sasquatch stories and stuff like that, we discovered that too as well. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys sound like you're similar to what I do. I like the ghosts, but I'm also interested in the cryptids, the UFOs,
Yes.
all of that stuff as well. And then next, ghost stories for the winter.
Yes.
Why why did you decide to revive the Victorian tradition of winter ghost story?
Back to the Vancouver Police Museum. So there was the first time that we actually introduced our immersive event, which we do a series of campfire stories events where we set up like a fake campfire, the starry sky. We put up a tent like indoors
Sound
and
effect,
we
Gina.
tell campfire. Yeah, we tell campfire stories. We did one of those a couple of years ago at the Vancouver Police Museum one winter. And we made up a bunch of stories. So these were like more like campfire stories. We read some of our regular books, but then we also made up some fictional stories. People said, "Oh, where can you find these fictional tales?" But they weren't in a book. So we thought, well, maybe we'll come up with a little series of ghost stories for winter and compile what we had and then write some more fictional. So it's kind of our first run at like having a series of short stories that are some are like a historical nonfiction, but then there's a lot of like the old traditional, like just going back to when we were kids and like Goosebumps and Alfred Hitchcock wrote children's stories too. So it's like young adult, I would say to adult, but really anybody could read these. Like they're just fun. We had illustrations included in there. So we wanted just something that captured also something magical and a little bit different.
Yeah, and I know that like in the UK a lot, like back in Europe and there, they used to talk a lot about that. They used to share that information back in the late 1800s, and that was sort of their tradition during the fall and winter months. You couldn't do much, it was cold and you sat by the fireplace and you told stories. And but I also know too that like when we started doing our walks and our other events, even like doing our private paranormal investigations, people used to ask us, do you guys ever think of doing something for the kids, for something for the youth? We started doing these campfire stories. And it's kind of cool because we feel really excited about this because it caught on. And there is a association here, the Fraser Valley Regional Libraries in British Columbia, that comprises 25 libraries. And they reached out to us. And when they got wind of the fact that we were doing our campfire stories, they asked us if we would be interested in presenting these to all the different libraries, all 25 libraries. So we're like, hey, yeah, for sure. So we were all excited about that. So that was
So we
that
have a
was
campfire stories tour that we're doing right now. So we
Oh,
started with a couple locations. We're doing one on the 22nd of November too. So, but people of all ages come. So it's kind of more fun, a little bit lighter. We don't get into like any gory details. Like even if there's like, tricky history, we don't use some of the language that we would normally use. But yeah, but people still get the intrigue, the history, the mystery, and kind of
yeah.
the fun part of like being creeped out and spooked.
Right, right. And I know when we pass along like a flashlight as well when we read our stories, fun because we do share stories that are coming from our evenings and avenues, but also we throw in some of our ghost stories for winter as well. So people can get a little mix of both.
nice. Very nice. Your work has won multiple awards for heritage interpretations. How do you balance entertainment with that historical accuracy and preservation?
Oh, well,
Oh,
for us especially, it's really important we convey the history. Like I said, we never really wanted to, our whole goal was never to be like into paranormal investigation. That was not our first primary goal, but we wanted to definitely capture the history side of stuff. And I think it has to be sort of a very, I would say, a balance, a very careful balance between what you're actually expressing in terms of if there's a location that's haunted or not. And that's why Gina and I like to go to these locations firsthand. We don't ever take information from the internet and just, put it into our own words. We want to actually go to the place, investigated, researched, talked to also the curators, the people who are actually responsible for holders of information. And we compile and put all that together. So for us, it's really important that history comes first. And like Gina said, if there's no ghost story attached to a location, so be it. That's fine, because a
Yeah,
lot
we
of the
still
time,
include those in our books.
yeah, for sure. And the history is still always there. But if there's a legend or folklore, let's throw it in too. So we don't want to lose that. And the cool thing is that we're actually bridging the gap between history and the paranormal. And that's what kind of excites us the most. And I mean, we have our awards to kind of like to back us up on that. So the proof is in the pudding, because we know we're doing the right thing, so we're being recognized by the heritage of BC as well. So that's the exciting part.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of the balance is just making sure that you have accurate information and that, that you do the research and that it's not always about the ghost story. So sometimes the ghost stories are there, but sometimes, especially in paranormal tourism, you have to be really careful because people sometimes want to embellish just to make it more exciting. But I think the way we make it entertaining is more the locations that we go. So if we are conveying something, like if we're doing a walk or some sort of event, we actually go to the location. So we have it at the museum where maybe, there's been something, it's already a historic location. So it already feels a little bit different. If we do a walk, we go to a location, Pit Lake, where there's been sightings. We know that there's been a lot of information. We've talked to people there. And so, yeah, we just I think we rely a little bit on the atmosphere as well. So I think it's not just always the dramatic effects or something that you have to convey necessarily, but you just want to maybe go to the location. And that's what we like doing, is going to different locations and places like the library. I would say part of our entertaining part is not necessarily that we need to embellish the facts or make it spooky, but we make the atmosphere spooky. Like we have the campfire, we make sure that the lights are out, and we have the projectors for the starry sky. We have we have sound effects. We have spooky sound effects too. So yeah, we just kind of make sure we never play with the facts. So that's one thing, is that we rely a little bit on the atmosphere and making sure that we have the perfect spot for like this spooky presentation.
Yeah, and I think you guys really do. You're kind of very similar to what I am doing, where history meets the paranormal. To managing that entertainment value, you have to do it right.
And I think too, sometimes we've found that with certain stories of prominent people, they have a more interesting history than almost the ghost story. Like if you delve into things, like we have an architect here in BC who a lot of his locations are said to be haunted, but boy, did he ever have an interesting life. He ended up having affairs and there was scandal. He moved back to England. The wife had an affair with the chauffeur. Then the guy was murdered by the chauffeur. And we kind of, so you end up like, this story itself is kind of fascinating. So even real life stories can be very, very entertaining. Yeah, the ghostly parts are great, but the lives of these people are worthy of a story in itself.
Mhm. And not to put down also TV and whatnot. I know there's a lot of great reality paranormal shows out there, but sometimes you just have to make sure, because I know that networks look for a different type of aspect. They even have certain criteria sometimes. So, and I mean, for us, we want to be as genuine as possible. That's the thing. And as Gina said, we don't mess with the facts.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes really truthfully, a ghost hunt is boring, you know? It's not like what you see on TV. Those are curated shows for an hour, so everything's edited to make sure it looks like very dramatic, everything's happening. Oh no, we've set at locations where not much happens. You have to go through a few hours to just get something, and then a lot of times you have to go back a few times to really experience something too. So we go and do repeat visits. You're not just going to walk into a location and then you're hearing voices and footsteps and oh no, it's not always like that.
And you
Yeah.
don't have to go ghost hunting at night all the time.
They'll come out during the day too, maybe a little less spooky, which is in some cases okay.
Just a couple more questions before we wrap up here. What BC haunted locations are still on your bucket list?
Ooh.
Oh, Gina, we've been hearing this over and over for the last couple months now, the Ioko ghost town.
Yes.
Yeah, so just it's close by to us. It's about maybe 30 minutes away from where we live.
Mhm.
But that place had some interesting, creepy stories there too, as well. It was like a company town. It was built around refineries and whatnot, and lumber as well, always close to like the Fraser River. but that's one location. And what about the island?
I think definitely you want to go to Nanaimo. We've been hearing about, people have been reaching out to us, like say, go to Nanaimo. There's just so many different cities and different places. I mean, the list is endless. We do want to return back to the Gold Rush Trail and go a little further north. So we'd like to get over to Barkerville because that's known to be a very active place and a very historical place. So there's some places that we want to venture, definitely. And I'm sure others will crop up that we don't even know about.
Great. For history lovers who are paranormal curious, like many of my listeners, what's the best way to start exploring BC's haunted heritage?
Oh, wow.
Go to your favorite museums, go to your heritage sites, talk to the curators, the staff. They always have fascinating stories. If you're somebody who's maybe not so much a museum person, if you are fascinated by the paranormal, visit your local cemetery. Those are free. You can walk through them. You find a lot of information on pioneers and things you can look up later. So a lot of times when we go to a town, we not only visit the historic sites, but we kind of hit the cemeteries too, just to see where interesting people are laid to rest.
Yeah, especially the people who lay the foundation for the cities and the locations. Yeah, for sure. And I would also say too, talk to your local people who are around, like just in your neighborhood, because some of the people have been there longer, like than you have, and they can share a lot of information, provide you with sources as well. And even anything like just even go online, read up, but take it with a grain of salt because sometimes the information there can be a little bit mixed and not as accurate. Go and do your research and archives as well. Go to your city, anywhere that can provide.
You're a paranormal enthusiast. You hear all the stories, but go visit and see for yourself.
Do you guys have any upcoming events or publications that you'd like to put out there?
Well, we do have volume 4 coming out, and that's going to be in the new year, 2026 for sure. And then obviously a couple events coming up, Gina, too, next weekend.
We are at a theater that is very historic. It's in New Westminster, BC. So we're at the Burning Leg Theater. A few tickets left. We will be chatting with some very interesting people who are coming to the event as well. We've never investigated there, so we're very excited to investigate there. We do have a Campfire Stories event, a couple of them still. November 14th, we have an event at the Mackin House in Coquitlam, where you can come join us around the fireplace. We'll be telling some spooky stories for a little bit. November 22nd, we're at the Terry Fox Library telling some spooky stories as well during the afternoon. So come on out. Still plenty of events to join us if you haven't had a chance to yet this year.
An exciting thing is that next year we already got a few items that are already booked, a few locations. So we're already working on that.
That's exciting. And lastly, if my listeners would like to follow you guys or learn more or watch some of the stuff that you have, where can they find you guys?
So we have our website, hauntedhistorybc.com. So you can check out all our information there. And we have little short stories as well, because Jeremy, you were reading some of them as well too. Places we've visited, and we tell a brief story a little bit about what had happened there and the history. You can also find us on Instagram, Haunted History BC. And then you have Twitter or X as well, Haunted History too. So you can find us out there as well.
Okay. And I'll make sure to put all those links in the description below so everyone can check that out. Gina, Victoria, thank you for taking us on this journey through BC's haunted history. What you've documented is just miraculous. And I'm very, I appreciate you sharing your research and experiences with us tonight.
Well, thanks for having us. Yeah, it was a great way to kind of wrap up a very paranormal weekend.
For having us. It was a lot of fun chatting ghosts and history.
So, just to repeat what you guys had said, you can find Gina and Victoria's work at hauntedhistorybc.com or follow them on Instagram, Haunted History BC, to keep up with their latest investigations and publications. If you're planning any paranormal tourism to British Columbia, their site is a wealth of research. Maybe one day I'll make it up to the Quesnel Museum and meet Mandy myself.
For sure.
Handed the haunted doll.
We'll put in a good word for you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And remember, history never truly dies, it just finds new ways to haunt us. Until next Saturday, keep digging into the darkness.